Hi everybody, welcome back to Paleo Baking Live. We're baking again today. I have some fun holiday treats for you that are packed with nutrients so you don't feel bad about eating them. The first thing I want to talk to you about today is how to make a grain-free gingerbread cookie. This is a fabulous dough for cutouts and it pretty much, performs just like any other gluten-based cookie dough. And I've got old Bessie here today to help me out with making the dough. We've got a lot to get through in a short amount of time, so we're gonna get started. First, I'm gonna have some palm shortening. I have a half a cup. We talked about this last week with the biscotti. It's an excellent replacement for dairy, and it performs like a shortening. It's an all-natural product. That color is natural. There's nothing artificial added to this. I'm gonna put that into the mixer, half a cup, and all the recipes will be on the website. And this time I'll have some of the technique videos also posted. So that should hopefully help you if you don't get to remember everything I do today. The next ingredient is a half a cup of coconut sugar. I've also talked about this before. It's a very unprocessed, low glycemic sugar. So that's going in. One of my favorite things about the gingerbread dough that I used to make when I was doing, what we would consider more traditional baking was molasses. Molasses just gives this gingerbread dough that really rich, delicious sugar flavor without being super sweet because it's unsulfured. This is actually the good stuff that they toss out when they make white processed sugar. This is all the nutrients and all the good stuff, and they get rid of it. So let's use this instead. Molasses is actually considered a superfood. So why not have nutrient-dense cookies? So that's a quarter cup, and a little dab will do you with the molasses, and you can see it's really messy. So I'm gonna get all that in there. And thank goodness for silicone spatulas, right? And I'm gonna turn that on. So I'll just put the paddle here, and I have all my little notes all over the place too, because there's so many things I'm showing you today that I wanna make sure I get it all straight. So while that's creaming, I'll show you the rest of what I have setting here, all set up in my mise en place. I have 2 cups of almond flour. My little eyeball doesn't want to follow me today. I have 2 cups of almond flour and 1 cup of tiger nut flour. Now you can go 3 cups of almond flour if you like, but I like to mix it a little bit. I think it gives the dough a little more of the gluten type quality that you would get from a traditional all-purpose flour. And then I have 3/4 cup of tapioca flour and 1 tablespoon of coconut flour. These 2 flours really help to give you that gluten texture, that kind of stretchiness and chewiness that you get when you bake with gluten. But we're not baking with gluten. And these are all very nutrient-dense flours. When I mix these together, it not only mimics gluten, but it gives you so many good vitamins and nutrients. There's zinc and magnesium in these nuts, and those are great nutrients that you don't always get in everyday food. So let's get it from your sweets. And then in this cup, I've already measured out a tablespoon of cinnamon. We want it to be really pronounced. 2 teaspoons of ground ginger and a teaspoon of ground clove. Now you could go a little more ginger if you like. The thing I like is to give it that really nice pronounced ginger flavor, but not let it get too hot, because ginger can have quite a spicy flavor. I'm just gonna mix those right in with the dry and stir those together. And you can see this doesn't really need sifted. If you wanted to sift it, that'd be okay. Or if you wanna just mix it with a whisk to help break up any lumps that you may have. If you get an extra fine almond flour, it will not be really lumpy. The thing you want to avoid is almond meal, which is more coarsely ground and isn't going to perform quite as well as an extra fine grind. And last but not least, I have a teaspoon of baking soda and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I just like to mix all of my dry ingredients together, make sure that they're all really combined and well dispersed. And that's it for the dry. Oh, I wanted to show you, this is what the tiger nut flour bag looks like. I can get it at any of my natural food stores, Whole Foods, places like that, or on Thrive Market. They also have this, and I think I may have even ordered this on Thrive Market. The nice thing about this is it's a good substitute for almond flour if you don't want to use almond flour or if you have a nut allergy. And this is actually nut-free, even though it's called tiger nut. It's a fiber. It's a small root vegetable. Last but not least, we're going to put an egg. And I have an egg right here. I'm just going to crack it into this bowl. I always like to crack eggs. Whoop, stuck my thumb right through it. I like to crack an egg into a bowl just to make sure there's no shells or anything. And this recipe doesn't call for vanilla, but if you wanted to add some vanilla, feel free. So let's go back over here and see how we're doing. It's creaming together very nicely. And one of the things I really like to do is leave the ingredients out for about an hour before I start. You can certainly use them cold, but the egg, if it's at room temperature, will blend in much better. If it's a little warmer, not quite right out of the fridge. You can add it right out of the fridge, but it'll take longer to mix. So either get it out in advance and it'll mix in right away, or go straight from the fridge and it'll just get, it'll just take a little longer. So this is all nice and creamed. Show you how it looks. Nice and creamy. Just want those to blend together. This is considered a creaming method, and that's because we always cream the fat and the sugars together before adding the rest of the ingredients. So now I'm just gonna go back on slow and add the egg. And I'll just wait till that gets nice and combined. While that's happening, I'll just put these things away. So you might have noticed I'm wearing my Chefs Against Hunger t-shirt today. I'm very excited because this organization has been around since 2015, and it's a local organization here in Central Florida, started by my dear friend and former manager. He started the organization as a way to give back, and recently he lost the locations where we were cooking, and we just landed a new location. So tonight will be our first night feeding about 80 to 100 people in need. We're very excited to be out there doing that. In fact, some of our team is already in the kitchen getting things going, and I'm gonna meet up with them when I'm finished here. And you can learn more about Chefs Against Hunger at chefsagainsthunger.org. And I also wanted to let everybody know, anyone that's doing a Whole30, I'm gonna donate $10 of every Whole30 enrollment to Chefs Against Hunger. So now the egg is all blended in, and I'm just gonna go ahead and add all of these dry ingredients. And again, it's gotta be on slow. You don't wanna have one of those dust explosions. And I just like to kind of push it in from side to side, so it goes straight into where the paddle is. And I do make a little mess, but that's half the fun. Now I'll let that go for a little bit because I want to make sure that all those flours get really absorbed. I did talk about this a little bit last week. One of the things that you want to be really careful of when you're using non-gluten or grain-free flours is they need extra time to absorb the liquid and become more malleable. So I'm just going to let that go. Clean up my mess a little bit. Now I did tell you that I'm doing cookies and cocoa, and this is so fun. Let me show you. These are cocoa bombs. Aren't they fun? It's a chocolate sphere that I created out of a silicone mold, and inside it has marshmallows and cocoa powder and a little coconut sugar and some caramel sauce that I made with maple syrup and coconut milk. All completely paleo, all low glycemic. When you drop one of these into a cup of hot almond or coconut milk, you have the best hot cocoa. You will not miss any of the dairy or any of the extra sugars. And you can fill these with whatever you want. So I'm gonna show you some of the things that I think are fun to put into these cocoa bombs. And this is a very simple way to use the chocolate. The chocolate does not require tempering. It's not gonna be as stable as if you were to temper an actual chocolate, but you know, it's for home cooks, and I want you to be able to do it in your kitchen with very few special tools. So let me show you how it's done. Okay, our dough looks really good. Give it one last quick whip, and I'll grab my plastic wrap. Because I like this dough to chill for a couple of hours before I try and roll it out. It also really helps bring all of the grains together. And I see someone making a comment, so let me get on and see who's talking to me. So while we're doing that, just gonna clean this off. See, the paddle just is nice and clean. And I'm just gonna use my rubber spatula to move this dough straight onto the plastic wrap. And it really holds together nicely, you can see. And I'm just gonna center it on the plastic wrap, and without really having to touch it much, cover it both sides and fold the sides in. And that's it. It can go in the fridge just like this. You can divide it into portions. This will yield about 18 medium-sized cookies, and I'll show you the cookies that I already have done. So I'm gonna put this in the fridge. And here's the dough ready to roll out. I'm gonna return this thing after today. Goodness. So let me grab my rolling pin. I like these flat rolling pins. This is like a French rolling pin. Some of them are tapered on the ends. Some have handles. If you look up here, you can see my giant rolling pin. I don't really use that. It's just for decoration. And I have some flour, some more tapioca flour that I'm just going to use to create a little bit of a barrier between the counter surface and the dough. And I like to just cut this in half and roll half at a time. And then I can stick the other half in the fridge. But I'm just gonna show you how to do a couple. So I'm gonna sprinkle the counter with the flour and shape this. I like to keep it somewhat rectangular shape, and then hit it with a little more on top. You don't wanna do too much flour because it does leave like a floury coating and makes your cookies kind of have that weird texture. So we don't want that. But I do like to keep moving it around slightly. And again, very light coating. Turn it upside down. Keep going until you get it to about 1/4 inch thick. And you can use a bench scraper like this, or you can use, I like an offset spatula. And I'm just gonna get these a little thinner. The dough will crack a little bit on the edges. Don't worry about that. Just kind of squish it back together. It'll be fine. And I have 2 cookie cutters. I have my Christmas Christmas tree and my little gingerbread man. Of course, we're doing gingerbread, right? So I'm just going around, starting with the outside edge and fitting these in as close as possible. And I have a sheet pan ready to go with some parchment. He popped right out of the cookie cutter, which is always lucky. And you can see how thick he is. And I just arrange them on the sheet pan as I go. And I'll cut out a couple Christmas trees. Again, staying as close to the edge as possible. The reason I like to maximize when I roll out the dough, I want to use as much of it as possible, is every time you re-roll the scraps to go back and cut more cookies, the tougher it's going to get. You want it to be tender. Plus the little bit of flour that you're using to dust the surface gets worked into the dough, and that's just going to make it a different texture than the amount of flour that we already have going. So that's how I cut them out, and they'll go in the oven for 8 to 12 minutes. If you like a crispier gingerbread, go about 12 minutes. If you like a softer gingerbread, anywhere between 8 and 10. And again, you may have to adjust depending on the size of the cookie cutter that you're using. So let me pop these in the oven. And I just set that for 8 minutes. And I'm gonna put this back in here so I can roll the rest of them out later. And I'm seeing comments on my phone all the way over there, but I'm not seeing them here. Hi, Barb. Oh, do you like the fireplace? I am returning this thing, honestly. Good. So there's our cookies. And I'm just going to use my bench scraper to clean off my counter real quick. This is another one of those professional tricks. Everything scrapes right up and goes right into the sink. So we have our cookies finished, and now we need to decorate them, but we can't use sugar. Actually, we can. We're going to use monk fruit sweetener. And this is where, you know, we kind of draw a fine line between what we're doing paleo and what we're doing food freedom. It is the holidays, and we do want everything to kind of be what we're accustomed to with traditional baking, but we do want it to have a little bit of a you know, healthy slant. So instead of powdered sugar, I'm using powdered monk fruit sweetener. Monk fruit comes from a fruit in Asia, and it's powdered, and it's 2 times sweeter than actual sugar. And it's just like powdered sugar. I keep it in an airtight container. I take it out of the bag and keep it in an airtight container. And you can see it works just like powdered sugar, performs the same way. The royal icing that I've made is a cup of the monk fruit sweetener, 1 egg white, and just a little bit of water. I start with maybe a half a teaspoon. I'm gonna put a teaspoon on the recipe, but adjust it to how you want the thickness. And then I add a little vanilla. So it's gonna have a little bit of an off-white, more natural white color. And I just mix it till it's smooth. I've already mixed this here. And then I've picked out a few food colors. I wanted to show you powdered food color. This is great for water-soluble coloring. When you cook or bake with something that has fat in it, you need a fat-soluble color. When you cook with something that's water-soluble, this is simply sugar and water and a little bit of egg white, doesn't have the fat. You need a water-soluble color. So this is a powder, it's very intense. I have all different colors. You can buy these on Amazon. I got these from my former employer who carried lots of really fun pastry ingredients. And I mixed a little bit of red and a little bit of green. And if you just cover them with plastic touching, they actually keep really well. I made these yesterday, and this morning I just added a little bit of water. If you cover it with plastic, it won't make that tough skin. Just gonna add a little more water to the white, and then I'm gonna show you how I mix. Just mix the water right in. You want it to be just a little thicker than a heavy cream consistency. And the other thing about the monk fruit sweetener, again, it's not perfect. Doesn't have all of those additives and terrible processed ingredients. So it doesn't dry completely opaque white like a powdered sugar royal icing would. So you want it to be just a little thicker. Now, a lot of people like to use the flooding technique. Flooding is great if you have all day. I do not have all day. When I was baking professionally, I would do thousands of Cleveland Brown cookies every home game and thousands of Christmas cookies every holiday. So I figured out some ways to have some shortcuts. So what I've done here is I've already dipped these cookies. And by dip, I will show you what I mean. And you can see these, I did these yesterday and I have them wrapped in the plastic wrap. They just have some little sort of spots where they didn't dry completely white and the icing soaked into the cookie a little bit. And that's perfectly okay. I kind of like how they have a natural look. They don't look so manufactured. And we're home baking. We're not doing this professionally, right? So all I do is hold the cookie very carefully and I dip it face first into the icing. And I'm kind of squishing it around. I don't want it on the edges. I just want it on the top layer. And when I pull it out, it looks like that. And then I just gently wipe down the front. And I had a little green on my finger, so now he has some green too. And I'm just sort of pushing it around so it has a pretty even consistency. And I think it's best to do with your fingers. And that's it. You set him down and let him dry. And the nice thing about the frosting being a little extra thick too is you can fill in any of the cracks where they may have split a little bit while they were baking. Now I'll do the Christmas tree. Same thing, just kind of dip it in there and roll it around. And it sticks to the cookie. And then you just kind of wipe the excess. With the Christmas tree, I'll go from the wide part to the narrow part, just to make it nice and even, and then touch up those corners where the little branches stick out. And that's it. And then they dry. You can let them dry for about an hour, or you can dry them overnight. Wash my hands. And now I'm going to show you how I like to decorate. I'm making pastry bag with just parchment paper. I folded it so that the top corner comes to the edge. And then I'm going to cut that with the knife. And you can use any knife. Right through the seam. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. Just like that. So now you have a triangle. And then I'll fold it in half. If I'm doing a lot of icing, I'll use a big triangle. But since we're just doing a little bit of red and a little bit of green, I'm folding it in half again. And going through that fold. So now I have two triangles. Now here's the trick to rolling a paper cone. You start with the widest flat edge across the bottom. Let me get the cookies and then I'll show you. And those look Don't those look delish? Just gonna let those cool. I'm putting a sheet pan with a little bit of parchment paper into the oven, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Another one of those fun tricks. Actually, I'll leave the parchment off. I just want that pan to get warm. Okay, back to the cone. What we're gonna do is we're going to hold it with the widest edge at the top, and then we roll the one corner up to the bottom corner, so it's like that, and then wrap the second corner around the outside all the way around and meet it to the top. So you have 3 points. You have the 3 points together, and then the bottom has a nice tip on the end. You can slide these around a little bit. Slide them to get that point as tight as possible, and then fold it down. And I like to put a little tear in the top and give it a little extra fold like that. So it looks like that. Now it's gonna hold together nice and tight, and we can drop our colored frosting right into the cone. I like the tip to be super tight. I'm making these so that point could poke your eye out. But the reason for that, the point for that is then after you fill it, you cut it off to whatever width you want, rather than trying to slide it around and get the opening just the way you want it, because it usually ends up too big and too sloppy. So I'm just gonna spoon this green icing into the cone. And it's nice and thick. If it's a little thin, it might bleed onto the white. Now that I have it filled, I'm gonna fold in the sides. Actually, let me go this way. Almost like triangular shape. And roll this down. After you roll it down like this, that's where you squeeze from. If you try to squeeze from here or down here, it's gonna pop out of the top. This way it's sealed and it's gonna stay closed, and you just squeeze from the top. So now let me fill the red one. And I'll show you, you get a lot of control by doing it this way. This red looks a little lumpy. Now, lumps inside of, let me show you how to do that again, okay? You're gonna make it flat after you put the icing in, make it flat. Fold, fold, and roll. Okay, and you can see as I'm rolling, the icing is going down into the tip. I'm just gonna take a flat edge knife and cut to the width that I want. Just cut the little point of the paper off. And if you want a really wide tip, cut a wider tip. I like to start small and go bigger rather than the other way around, because once it's already cut very large, you can't make it smaller. Let me just see if I have any questions on anything so far. I'll just put this away because we can make more triangles out of this. So let's start with the Christmas tree. Can you see him there? I like to test it a little bit, make sure it's coming out okay. Yep, looks good. I'm just gonna outline. Let me take one of each and then I can put these out of the way. So I'll start with the Christmas tree and I'm just outlining. Now here's the other trick. You want to use a drop technique. So drop technique means you're not actually touching the cookie. You're letting the icing come out and you're letting it flow around. So you can see it's not touching. it's being very bad. Some lumps in there. There we go. And go very slowly, let it just kind of fall out of the bag and direct it. Once in a while you might get a lump from the sugar, so you need to kind of squeeze the tip and get it out. And I left this super thick. It probably could have been just a little thinner. That is not so gorgeous. But you get the idea, and they don't have to be perfect, right? We're doing this for fun. And then I'll just take the red, cut the tip off a little bit more. Again, this one looked really lumpy when I was putting it in, so I don't know what we're gonna get. This is live, folks. Yep, and the red doesn't want to cooperate. So, sorry about that. Let's go back to the green. We can just put some little green ornaments. Just like that. Doesn't have to be too fancy. Okay? It's always best to make the icing that actual day that you're gonna use it. Even if you're using royal icing with actual powdered sugar, you wanna make sure that you make it the same day. So, kind of my mistake on that one. I'll post a video later with how it's supposed to be. And then if you wanted to, while the icing is still wet after you do the white dip, you could sprinkle with some of these guys if you don't want to get crazy with the decorating, and they will stick to the icing. So that's a fun option too. Again, these are candy and they're processed and all that jazz, but it's a very tiny bit of it that you're using, so you don't have to feel bad about it. Okay, next, this is so fun. We are going to make chocolate bombs. Now chocolate, typically, what a chocolatier would use is considered couverture. It's going to have at least 32% cocoa butter, and I don't want to get into all of the technicalities of that. What I want to show you is how you can make a simple chocolate shell just by melting some chocolate chips. Now what I'm using is called Enjoy Life. You can find lots of different brands of organic and natural chocolate chips. This one happens to only have unsweetened chocolate and cane sugar. If you see ingredients like cocoa liquor, chocolate liquor, soy emulsifier, especially sunflower emulsifier is more acceptable. Watch what you're buying. Be very careful with what you're buying. So I have right here 1 cup of chocolate chips, or about 4 ounces if you want to weigh it. I prefer to weigh things because every chocolate chip brand is going to be a different size and take up a different amount of space in a measuring cup. So try and get something that is a small size, and then we're just going to melt it for 1-minute increments. I'll actually start with 2 minutes on 50% power. If you go any hotter than that, you might scorch the chocolate. So depending on your microwave, mine is pretty strong. So I like to do just 2 minutes at 50% power for dark chocolate. And then if I was melting white chocolate, I would do 30% power. So let me go pop these in the microwave and I'll be right back. Oh, let me do this first. I have 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, the unmelted coconut oil. I'm going to add that right to the chocolate chips. If you've ever seen Magic Shell, this is essentially going to be Magic Shell. Magic Shell is awesome because you can melt coconut oil and chocolate chips, just like I'm saying, from the grocery store, no big deal chocolate chips, and it will instantly freeze when you put it on your ice cream. So what I'm showing you here is how to make a shell, an actual shell for the spheres out of chocolate and coconut oil. So let me put this in the microwave. I'll be right back. And as I said, those are in for 2 minutes on power 5. And while that's cooking, I'm going to show you some of the equipment that I'm using. Yes, I will make sure that I tell you again on the good chocolate chip brands to buy. Thanks, Barb, for that question. Essentially, you just wanted to say unsweetened chocolate and cane sugar. Those are the 2 ingredients you want out of everything. Now, I really like this one particular brand that's not available to retail, but there are a couple websites where you can buy it, but you have to buy a 2-pound bag. So actually 2 kilo bag, so 4.5 pounds. A lot of people don't want that much chocolate sitting around. Having trouble with our internet. There we go. I can send you the link for that one as well. That was my favorite brand ever. It still is. It's called Falkland. It's from Switzerland. But you can essentially get this done by using the stuff you can find in the grocery store. So this is a silicone mold. It's a sphere shape, as you can see. It's a half of circle. And I'm going to show you how to make the shell. These are, as I said, silicone. You can bake in these. I used to bake little cheesecake bombs in these. A bombe, B-O-M-B-E, is a French word for anything spherical. If you've ever seen a half dome cake or little chocolate mousse bombs that are about this shape with chocolate mousse inside and topped with chocolate mousse, I used to make a bazillion of those too. This is the mold that you can use to make those. So what I'm going to do with the chocolate is fill these to the top. I'll fill these to the top and then I'll pop them in the freezer. Let me get that chocolate. Now you can see this has gotten nice and hot. It's warm to the touch, and the chocolate really doesn't need any more heat than this. So I'm just going to start stirring. And that oil is kind of floating in there, so I'm stirring it so it can all come together. And there's enough residual heat in here to melt it the rest of the way. Do not overheat your chocolate. And the other trick with chocolate is to make sure that you don't get it to, not only just get it hot, but don't get any water mixed in it. If you're using utensils or the bowl, make sure everything is totally dry. Chocolate is made of crystals. When you melt it, you break down the crystals. To rebuild the structure, you have to heat it and then bring the temperature back down to a cooler temperature. All different kinds of chocolates have different temperatures. This is essentially how you temper something. But since we're adding the coconut oil to this, the coconut oil is going to help it harden so we don't have to actually do any tempering. It's almost nice and smooth. You can see that's all it took. 2 minutes on power 5, 50% power. And I'll just do a couple of these. If you wanted to do more, you can just double this recipe. I'm just using a cereal bowl to melt it. I like the way the ceramic holds the heat. Feels nice and warm on the outside. And I'm gonna put this mold on a sheet pan because I want it to stay nice and steady. And I'm gonna pour the chocolate in until it's completely full to the top. That's the other reason why you want it on a sheet pan. Once this thing is completely full, you can't pick it up and move it because it's flexible. So there we are, completely filled to the top. We're gonna put this in the freezer for about 3 minutes. What's gonna happen when it hits the freezer? The outside's gonna freeze first, and then the inside will stay liquid. When we pour out the liquid, what do we have left? The shell, okay? So let me pop these in the freezer, and I'm gonna pull out one that's already done. Now what I would do is after I pour the chocolate out, I would take a scraper like this or a scraper like this, and I would simply wipe across the whole top. So I would just be wiping like this. And what that does is it gives it a nice clean edge, okay? So this, as you can see, I put the chocolate in, and then after about 3 minutes, I took it out, and it, the center wasn't set yet, so it poured right out. So now I'm just gonna invert this mold and pop it out. And there you have a beautiful little shell. Now, from here on out, I like to use gloves because I don't like to see fingerprints on that nice shiny shell. I actually did this when I was experimenting with the recipe, and I popped it out without paying much attention, and I shot it across the room, and it didn't even break. So these guys are pretty durable. So now let's grab that sheet pan that I was talking about before. This is hot. Don't forget it's hot. I'm going to put a piece of parchment on top. And now we're going to fill these guys. We have so many fun things to fill them with. I made some marshmallows. Yes, I made marshmallows from scratch. These marshmallows have some maple syrup and grass-fed gelatin, so they're full of collagen and protein and not too sweet because they're made with marshmallow. I'll put with maple syrup. I'll put the whole recipe on the website, but it's really simple. You cook water and maple syrup to 240 degrees. I'll put all the exact ingredients on the website. Once it hits 240 degrees, you have gelatin and more water bloomed in the mixer. I just used like a granulated, powdered, grass-fed gelatin. And you add the syrup that you cooked to 240 degrees to the gelatin on slow on the mixer with a whisk, and then turn it up, and it triples in volume and turns into marshmallow. Look at the marshmallow. And I cut it into squares so you can see. And you can dust these with arrowroot powder too. It looks a little lumpy, but they're delicious. So I'm just gonna pull some apart, and I'm gonna cut them into some smaller pieces because I want them to be small enough to fit into our bomb molds. And the reason I have this rack out is, you know what, before I get too crazy, let me show you how that works. Grab another sheet pan. Put these guys here. Now I bumped this a little bit when I put it in the freezer, so I'm gonna scrape that edge off, if I can get it off. Yeah, it's gonna come right off. Nice sharp tool like this really helps. Okay, it's not gonna But over a rack, when I invert this, and then I just kind of wipe it across the edge of the rack like this. If I hadn't spilled it everywhere, you can see that it made a shell on the inside. I'm just gonna remove that. This is what I love about silicone too. It's so forgiving. So even if you do make a little spill, see, I'm showing you how to fix your mistakes. It'll come right off. So now you can see that the shells are on the inside. Now we'll pop these back into the freezer and they'll freeze the rest of the way. Also make sure you have a nice level space in your freezer so that you can make sure that those are sitting nice and flat. And then all this extra chocolate that came off when when we dumped it, you can scrape it out into a bowl and use it again. It's not wasted. So there's a little chocolate class for you. Now we have our 2 spheres. I'm gonna put some gloves on. And we can put anything we want in these spheres, which is what makes them so much fun. Grab another sheet pan. And I'm gonna cut these marshmallows into some bite-sized pieces. Just quarter them. Now, who doesn't love a toasted marshmallow, right? So let's toast some marshmallows. You know how we toast marshmallows in a kitchen? With a torch. So there's some nice little pieces of marshmallow. And I'm gonna grab my torch. Where did I put my torch? Here he is. I'm just gonna get those nice and toasty brown. Look how yummy those are, just like a s'more. And they do melt a little bit. And then we're gonna top them with a little pink Himalayan sea salt. And that's just gonna stick right to that marshmallow. And it's good if you do this on a cold sheet pan too, it sort of minimizes the melting. Now, I'm trying to slide this out of the way so you can see. We still have this sheet pan, which is warm, okay? And I made a caramel sauce. This is the caramel sauce. It's maple syrup and coconut milk cooked for about 40 minutes until it's reduced to a nice, thick, syrupy consistency. It tastes just like caramel. I put a little Himalayan pink sea salt and a little vanilla after it cooks, and I'll show you that whole recipe as well. So now I'm just gonna spoon a little bit of this caramel sauce right into our half sphere. Okay? And then I'm gonna drop a little piece of this marshmallow. So we have a little bit of some more. And I've got some cocoa powder. Now this is alkalized Dutch processed cocoa powder. That's all it is. It's not Swiss Miss or anything else like that. This is just delicious cocoa powder. And I don't think you need any sugar in addition to this. I did about an actual measuring spoon, teaspoon, okay? Now I'm gonna take this other half of the chocolate sphere and just gently rub it across this hot sheet pan. So you see it kind of melting a little bit. And this is where the gloves come in, because you don't want it to be too soft or stick to your fingers. Now you can see the edges are melted, and we just fuse those together. Now, not all the edges are gonna close completely because, you know, we're not chocolatiers. We're not trying to make this something that's gonna win an award at the Coupe du Monde. But once that cools, it's done. It's ready to go. So let me get a little warm almond milk going. And I have my fun Christmas coffee mugs here. Let's get some of these things out of the way because we're gonna have cookies and cocoa. This caramel sauce is amazing. You want it just for anything. And you can see I have two different size spheres here. I made a big one to show you today because I thought it'd be a little easier to look at. And then these are smaller ones, which is really just enough for 8 ounces of milk, which is what I'm gonna put in here. And the marshmallows are delicious just on their own. Take my gloves off. Yes, get the torch, Barb. I can't live without the torch. I made pumpkin creme brulee on Thanksgiving with biscotti, and I used the torch to give it the brulee top with a little bit of coconut sugar. You can't live without the torch. I have more fun in the hardware store getting baking supplies than I do in the actual baking supply store. There's my milk. I'll be right back. So this is just almond milk like you buy in the grocery store. I heated up 1 cup. Fills my pretty little coffee mug. And now I'm just gonna take one of these bombs and I'm gonna drop it in. And he's just gonna start to melt as I stir. And the fun thing is if you put some surprises like the marshmallows, you can see he's really starting to melt now. And you just stir it together. There's the marshmallow popping out. And you have that nice, rich, dark chocolate along with the cocoa powder, the marshmallow, the caramel sauce, just that little hint of salt, which makes it so delicious. Because what's wrong with salted caramel, right? Nothing. It's one of my favorites. And there's your hot cocoa bomb. Give it a good stir, give that chocolate a chance to melt. I like to heat the milk up pretty hot, but not so hot that it's scalding, and then it kills the chocolate. We're gonna grab a cookie. These are so good. I like them a little crispy. The molasses gives them such a great flavor. And I made these cocoa bombs over the weekend. The guys tested them and they were pretty impressed. You're gonna see these everywhere right now. It's a really hot item. Everybody's doing it. But I'm telling you, if you can do one that's packed with nutrients, like these marshmallows with maple syrup and grass-fed collagen, the almond milk, the really delicious chocolate that has no additives or byproducts, and that caramel sauce with the coconut milk and the maple syrup. This is one that's worth the effort. It's a little ambitious, but I think you'll love it. So let me know if you try it. Post your pictures on Instagram and make sure you tag me. Don't forget, Chefs Against Hunger tonight. Keep an eye out on Facebook for the Chefs Against Hunger page. Like it and follow it. We love to have your support, especially during the holidays. I'm gonna be down there later tonight taking pictures and posting some fun things for you. And if you sign up for Whole30, $10 of your enrollment is gonna go towards Chefs Against Hunger. So, come on, you little thing. I'm returning this one and getting a new one. Hopefully by next week we've got a new one. Here's my pretty tree, my kitchen tree. Cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week with more holiday baking. Have a great day. Love you all. Mwah.